Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the European movement in Serbia to the conference, The Future of Decarbonization in Serbia and the Experience of the Visegrad 4 countries. We thank you very much for coming here today, where we are going to present the results of the project called Empowering Serbian Civil Society Organization in decarbonization process through the Visegrad Group experience, which is supported by the Visegrad Fund and the European organization from Czech Republic, and implemented by the European movement in Serbia. The goal of today's event is to present the results of the project and to discuss the importance and the ways of how to phase out the coal usage within the context of the environmental protection and the EU accession of Serbia. In this respect, we will reflect on the experience of the Visegrad Group countries as a good practice example and as an example which is closest to our country. We very much thank the distinguished representatives of the Ministry of Energy and Mining of the Republic of Serbia, Ministry of Environmental Protection, the EU delegation, the Visegrad Group, and representatives of the research institutes, think tanks, and civil society organizations who have valuably contributed to our project and our work contained within. As a result, we are putting forward today the presentation of a policy paper. The paper which examines the ways to further support the decarbonization process in Serbia and how to improve the role of the civil society organizations in this process. We consider this topic very important and crucial, both in terms of Serbia's EU accession and its citizens' well-being through the environmental protection. By committing to the EU's green agenda and in its effort to advance the decarbonization process, Serbia must adopt adequate regulations, invest in technology and knowledge, and consider pertinent social and economic impacts of this transition. The latter particularly because the transition affects energy prices, the labor markets, the environment, and ultimately the whole society. In order to ensure the fair transition to the green energy, when taking into account the fluctuating energy prices and the labor market demands, we have come to the conclusion that Serbia's strategic plans must be designed and implemented in a manner to protect the employment and economic security within the country. Currently, the Serbia's energy regulations is to a considerable extent harmonized with the EU, 65% with the EU standards. And the key document that is being developed, which is the Integrated National Energy and Climate Plan, for the period up to 2030 with projections to 2050, already defines decarbonization as one of the priorities. We are also expecting the same standard to be applied in the National Energy Strategy and National Spatial Plan. However, this is just the start of the transition process. There is still plenty of work pending and standing before us, such as further strategy implementation, transfer of technical knowledge, and assessing the socio-economic impacts of the green transition. To expedite decarbonization, Serbia should assess its needs, identify capacity gaps, and develop capacity building programs that are focusing on technical skills, knowledge exchange, and financial support, which is a very important aspect of the whole work. Funding constraints are everyone's problem, and that hinders further progress. However, there are EU allocated funds for the green agenda for 2002 environmental project, but we must invest our best efforts and to create synergies among all relevant stakeholders, most of them being present here today, in the most effective manners to access those funds and to utilize them. Serbian civil society organizations are dedicated to this important topic of decarbonization. 26 of them are, as per our knowledge, focused on environmental protection, and this number is growing. However, they do face funding challenges, as I have mentioned, and with increased financial support and recognition of their constructive role, the CSOs can be a valuable contributor to Serbia's improvement in environmental protection through decarbonization and raising public awareness and raising public level of knowledge about this important topic. Additionally, investing in awareness campaigns involving public institutions, companies, academia, and citizens is crucial. That requires better coordination and increased role of the civil society organization. The European movement in Serbia is one of the oldest civil society organizations in the country, which is for 30 years more now dealing with and promoting and advocating for implementation of the European values and standards and the EU integrations of Serbia, is recognizing this topic as important, and the role of civil society as a constructive contributor to the dialogue and cooperation of the public institutions and the citizens in creating adequate policies in these areas. In a nutshell, we are here to be a part of the solution, not the part of the problem, and we are here to provide and offer our best efforts, our expertise and knowledge, and to take part in this important dialogue for the benefit of our citizens. And we stand firmly in offering our cooperation to the public institutions, to our colleagues from the CSOs, and our colleagues also from the Visegrad Group countries, in continuing this project and taking it further and taking its recommendations further and channeling them into applicable reforms on ground. Only such synergy can benefit our citizens, and on this note I would like to close my welcome address to wish you a successful day, to thank our colleagues for coming from Europeum for coming to Belgrade and for recognizing this important issue. Also, thank you, Ambassador of Czech Republic, for joining us, Your Excellency, and we appreciate it very much. And to our partners from public institutions who are here today and our partners from the civil society organizations, I warmly invite you that we continue working on this important topic in the best possible and constructive manner for the well-being of our citizens. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you, Dragana, for such a great and very precise opening. I will not waste more of the time that should be dedicated to the experts that really understand the topic, that were part of this project that is supported by the International Visegrad Fund. I would just like to actually thank Visegrad Fund for cooperating with us on various projects that are actually concerning not only the V4 but also the cross-regional cooperation with the Western Balkans, because this is something that for us at Europeum, but in general I would believe in all of the V4 countries, is very important, because there are so many cultural, economic and other ties that we share with the Western Balkans, and we will discuss both this and of course everything that is concerned to the Serbia's EU accession process, regarding obviously the green ambitions of the EU, because those don't end with the borders of the EU, but they are cross-continental, maybe even global, I should say. So with this, I would like to invite Ambassador Tomasz Kuchta to provide his opening remarks.
Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank the European movement in Serbia, Czech Institute for European Policy, Europeum, and other partners from Visegrad 4 countries for having organized this conference. As you probably know, the Czech Republic is now holding for 12 months the rotating presidency of the Visegrad Group. We want to focus mainly on people-to-people contacts and practical transborder cooperation. That's why the motto of our presidency is V4 for citizens. We want that regional cooperation remains pragmatic, flexible and inclusive. Despite some differences in positions of the V4 countries, particularly in the EU foreign security agenda, the V4 cooperation remains one of our traditional regional formats for cultivating good neighborly relations. Czech presidency of V4 will be oriented more internally than externally and focus on practical level cooperation. That's why motto is V4 for citizens. Important aspect of V4 cooperation is the International Visegrad Fund. It also finances projects in Eastern Partnership countries, in Western Balkans. The fund has a good experience in cooperating with partners not only in Europe but also with South Korea, Japan and other countries. As far as I'm informed, today's conference is a part of a larger project financed by the International Visegrad Fund. Its goal is to help Serbia's EU accession process by sharing insights on the similarities and differences on the path of decarbonization of the countries of the Visegrad Group and Serbia. I'm not an expert in EU energy policy, but I know that it was the decision of EU member states to decarbonize as soon as possible, and it was the EU to define future steps to be taken. One of the steps is a coal phase-out and no financing of new investments in the coal energy sector from institutions such as EBRD and EIB, but the last year showed that the EU can be flexible. With the Russian aggression on Ukraine, it was necessary to give priority to the energy security aspect. No government will close the coal power stations without having alternative sources of energy. Within the Czech Republic's energy mix, coal represents 43%. 20 years ago, it was 60%. 36% of energy is provided by nuclear power stations. We are aware that the most important steps are ahead of us, and one day the sources of coal in Europe will be exhausted anyway. Now, I'm looking forward to hearing from experts what kind of energy can replace coal in the middle-term horizon and what are the main challenges for the Serbian energy sector. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ambassador. And now I would like to welcome also a representative of a crucial body here in the Republic of Serbia, Ms. Biljana Ramić. She's heading Department of, well, and now I lost, strategic planning, I'm very sorry, at the Ministry of Mining and Energy here in Serbia. So, Ms. Ramić, the floor is yours.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be here today with you, and thank you very much for the invitation and participation in this conference. Energy transition is a very complex topic, which is consisted from political, economic, social, technical, scientific and other aspects, and I must say that energy transition and green agenda today is a part of Serbian national policy. It has a very important role in the accession process to EU, but I would kindly remind you that Republic of Serbia is contracting party of the Energy Community Treaty, which means that Serbia has made lots of efforts and activities to adjust and harmonize energy sector in Serbia with EU policies in the field of energy since 2006. The process of decarbonization is not easy for Serbia, and the energy sector has the key role in that process. Why it is not easy? Because you probably know that the coal, lignite, is the main energy source for Serbia, and almost 70% of electricity production is coming from lignite. Therefore, lignite has a significant role in Serbia from the aspect of security of supply. So, energy sector in this moment is on some way, on some crossroad. On the one hand, we have very old system, and we need to modernize this system, infrastructure and practice. On the other hand, we are faced with very big challenges and a request from the aspect of the environmental protection and climate change. Therefore, Ministry of Mining and Energy has done lots of work in the last few years to improve, first of all, legal framework in order to define new conditions and directions for the improvement of the energy sector in Serbia. You know that we done amendments and improved energy law. Now we have also law on renewable energy sources, and we have new law on energy efficiency. But this is not enough. Besides that, we also need to improve the energy policy. Therefore, we are now in the process of the preparation new strategic documents. We are actually in the final phase of the preparation and the adoption two key documents for the new energy policy. These documents are integrated National Energy and Climate Plan. You probably know that we finalized public consultations on the draft of that document. Now we are in the process of consideration all comments, and we expect that this document will be adopted by December this year by Serbian government. We are also in the final stage of drafting new energy strategy, and we expect and plan to adopt this document also by the end of this year by Serbian government. These documents will define the main targets for Serbian energy sector for 2030 and give the projections and visions for 2050. The main targets which are proposed for 2030, first of all, are a reduction of GHG emission for 40.3% in 2030 in accordance with the 1990. Then to increase share of renewables. Share of renewables in 2030 should be 33.6%. And of course we defined amount of final and primary consumption which should be not increased in 2030. We try to be ambitious, but in a realistic manner. Why? Because from the energy aspect, 2030 is tomorrow. There is no lots of time for significant changes, and on the other hand, you have to know that we are living in a very unsecure time, especially when we are talking about energy sector. You are faced as citizens with high prices of energies. They are now unpredictable, and we certainly need to think about an aspect of the security of supply. But as I said, energy transition is not just a technical matter to change the structure of energy sector. This is a political, social issue, etc., etc. So all this should be very carefully analyzed and defined in order to not have negative influence on Serbian society. You can find the draft of our NECP on our website. Very soon you will have a draft of new energy strategy on our website, and we used lots of time to prepare this new energy policy, Serbian energy policy. We have started since 2021 and included lots of relevant stakeholders, lots of ministries, lots of institutions, agencies, civil societies in the whole process. We had lots of meetings, large public consultations, and in order to provide a very transparent process, informed people and include people and all relevant information in the document in order to provide a good, useful document. So in this process, I must say that we very often looked in the practice of lots of EU countries, and among them, of course, and Visegrad group countries, especially Poland and Czech are very interesting for us from the aspect of coal and security of supply. But you know that energy policy is something what should be monitored all the time, and on the base of this monitoring process to revise and to change targets in accordance with a real situation. So we are at the beginning actually of the process. We are at the beginning of the process of decarbonization. We are at the beginning of the process of NECP, because when we adopt this document, this is not the end. We need to monitor this energy policy, all these measures which we defined in these documents, report and revise to provide a real and good vision of our future. I must say that from my point of view, in these new strategic documents, renewables and energy efficiency should provide support for the target for the reduction GHG emissions. But basically, energy efficiency is the key. And the most of finance which defined in these documents refers to the measures of energy efficiency, not only from the side of the energy producers or suppliers, but also from the side of the customers. Of course, everything is possible to do if we have enough money. If we have enough funds, we can be much better than we defined and proposed now in these documents. But on the other hand, you have to know that we are not still a member of EU. EU has started with this practice 20 years ago. and provided relevant funds for their countries to support them in this process. In energy community, we do not have such funds. So please consider these proposed targets as a minimum. Certainly we can be and better if it is possible until 2030 and beyond. So I would like to say once again, everything depends on funds, but certainly the whole society, the whole population, all citizens should be included in this process and should change their behavior. Thank you very much, and on behalf of the Ministry of Mining and Energy, I wish you a successful conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Ramic, for giving us the impetus for the first panel. Actually, you have opened the discussion in a way, and I'm very happy to hear that actually we are all on the same side here and working along the same line with the same priorities and the same problems that we're facing. I would like to open the first panel called Climate Policies Matter, Implication for the Environment and the EU Accession, where I would like to warmly welcome our distinguished panelists, Mrs. Sandra Lazic, Head of Climate Change Department from the Ministry of Environmental Protection in Serbia, Mr. Avignon Antoine, Program Manager for Environment from the EU Mission to Serbia, and Mr. Damir Dizarevic, Project Coordinator from the Belgrade Open School. Without further ado, I would start immediately with the questions of our panelists. Some of these questions have already been mentioned in the introductory notes, but it's also good to hear the perspective of all important stakeholders, and I will hereby start with the Ministry of Environmental Protection. Mrs. Lazic, from your point of view and your institution, where do you see Serbia stand in the decarbonization process, and what are the main challenges that we are facing in it?
Thank you for your question, and thank you for inviting me. I'm really glad to be here, and I'm happy that I can greet you on behalf of the Ministry of Environmental Protection. When we are talking about the decarbonization process, as my colleague Biljana from Ministry of Mining and Energy already said, it's really, I'm glad that I can say that the decarbonization process is really one of our key priorities. As a Ministry of Environmental Protection, of course, our focus in the first place is, of course, on two key pillars, and these two key pillars are improvement of appropriate strategic framework and appropriate legal framework, legislative framework that should serve as a foundation, as a basis for all further activities in the decarbonization process. And I'm really happy that I can say that in the last few years we really made significant progress with adoption of some key strategic documents. First of all, we managed to adopt our revised national determined contribution, our revised NDC in accordance with Paris Agreement, and this NDC is 3 times more, has actually 3 times more higher emission reduction target compared to our previous NDC adopted in 2015. So this is as a first step. Then we also adopted this year low carbon development strategy with our key objectives in this process and with all measures that we should implement in order to achieve our vision to become a low carbon society with more resource efficient economy. Also, what I can say and what we are really intensively working on currently is actually preparation of a bylaws, because we adopted long climate change, first long climate change in 2021, and then so far we adopted 6 bylaws, and we are finalizing the 7th one, and by the adoption of the last one bylaw, we actually will introduce system for greenhouse gas emission permitting for the installation, and we will introduce monitoring obligation for the operators to really monitor and report and verify on their greenhouse gas emission, which is also really a significant step towards decarbonization of our economy. When we are talking about challenges, Biljan also mentioned some key challenges. Of course, that Serbia has challenges, that this will be a complex and challenging process for us, especially because we are facing with aging infrastructure in energy sector with some old technologies, and of course that investments needed in this sector are really huge. So these are some key challenges, but what also I can see now, since we are deeply into this legal and legislative preparation, is that also our industry may face with challenges, with compliance with the new requirements that are coming from new legislative acts. We are harmonizing now with EU legislation. So in terms of capacities, in terms of knowledge. So, of course, this will be learning by doing process, so it's good that we start. And also what I forget to mention is that we are also working on green environmental protection agenda, so-called green agenda strategy, which will also take into consideration seriously this decarbonization pillar. And what also I would like to share with you, we will tomorrow publish our first national adaptation program, which also should improve our strategic framework and prepare our economy to be more climate resilient. So it's also one very important document that is in final phase of preparation, and hopefully it will be adopted in forthcoming months.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lazic, for this initial perspective and opening the panel. And yes, the challenges are probably going to be repeated throughout the conference today. But also one of the priorities, we've mentioned several times the importance of this process within the EU accession. And here I will turn to Mr. Avignon from the EU delegation to Serbia to give us his perspective on the impact of the climate policies of the EU's Green Deal and to the accession process of Serbia, but also of the Western Balkans region in general.
Thank you, and thanks for the invitation to this important panel, Ambassador, Ms. Hermic, dear colleagues. I think seeing what happened in again last summer, floods, droughts, and climate turbulences over the planet, one would think, why have we been waiting so long to act? Some say it's too late to act, and some say it's never too late to act. So I think Serbia, Mr. Hermic, you said it's never too late to act, and Serbia is on board. I think Sandra also you mentioned this legislative proposal and actions from Serbia. Overall, the Balkans are a bit behind Europe, but we want them to be on board with the climate neutrality of 2050, the first climate law of the EU, and then the climate law in Serbia. When I accepted your invitation here, I saw in the invitation that it was written importance of coal phase out for environmental protection, and I would add and health citizens, and I would join Ambassador about Visegrad for citizens. I think if we don't put citizen in the middle in the center of our political action, policy action, then we lose the big picture. Too many people die from pollution, too many people die from adverse consequences of climate. Again, we saw this summer, and we saw this summer before, and it's just accelerating. So there's no time to lose. I think, unfortunately, I still sometimes discuss with climate skeptic, how do you call it, climato-skeptic. Well, you know, dinosaurs went extinct. Maybe climato-skeptic people will go extinct, but sometimes it's just incredible that we still have to argument that climate change, or global warming, better say, is made by human activities, and that we have a responsibility to change this. So the Green Deal from the EU, the Green Agenda from the Western Balkans is taking this philosophy and trying to push it through the legislative, across all legislative possibilities. So we have the climate law, we have the Fit for 25 toolbox. We're looking at carbon leakage with the carbon border adjustment mechanism, the CBAM that is carrying everyone. And we basically say that, you know, this green transition, it has to be a just transition and not just a transition. If we cannot work for the people, then what are we doing this? So I think this is the core of the EU, let's say, climate policy. Of course, there is energy security, there are geopolitical constraints, there are changes since the Russian aggression on Ukraine. The world is shifting fast. We also live in a world of very fast transmission of information, social media, and everyone has an opinion on everything. And I think we should also sometimes come back to science, come back to our senses, and look at what is there. So, of course, no transition can be done in a year or two. I think you said it. Serbian transition to maybe in the next energy strategy would clearly say if there is a coal phase out in 2050, or I don't know, you will tell us. But we see indeed that everything tends to try to protect citizens, protect the environment, protect the health, and we know that coal burning is not good. And you know, I could speak for hours about EU directives, but I think this is the core idea, and translating this into the Western Balkans, for which future we believe are with the EU member states. I think it's very important that experiences could take from Visegrad Group or in the region could be transmitted to Serbia, because there's a lot of lessons learned there, how to do business, how to quickly change, and you know, when you have a problem, you can go to your husband or wife, you can go to your neighbor. And maybe it's good to start Serbia, open up to the neighbor and ask the neighbors how things can be done better. I don't know if I answered your question. Did I? Okay, then I pass back to you.
Thank you very much. Yes, this awareness issue which you have mentioned also goes in line with the responsibility of the citizens, not only their right of influencing the policy making towards their benefit, but also in bearing the responsibility for implementing them on ground and being aware of their own responsibility towards the climate and the environment that they are living in. So this is one of the things that we have also recognized within the civil society. And on that note, I'm turning to the civil society representative at our panel, Mr. Didarevic. How active is civil society in the decarbonization process in Serbia? And what are the main challenges in this sector of work, and what needs to be improved?
Thank you very much for your question, and thanks for the invitation. Well, civil society organizations in Serbia have been actively advocating for the decarbonization of the energy sector in recent years, and many CSOs actually find it difficult, and they face challenges in accessing funds to complete their needs, because there is a limited number of projects from both the private sector and the international donor community. But as the year passed, the situation changes and there are much more funding opportunities. but that's still not quite enough. And in the end, for achieving the ultimate goal of the CSO sector in this decarbonization process, and that is to generate political will and to raise awareness among the citizens to move Serbian society towards the decarbonization process and to monitor the implementation of those policies, because that is the thing I'd like to underline. It's really important to draft all the legal frameworks and all the strategic and policy documents, but it is as important to actually implement them, because if you read the latest European Commission report on Serbia, a lot of the laws and a lot of the policy documents, we already have them and we are pretty well aligned with them, but it's the implementation that we lag behind quite a lot, if I have to say. And of course, it is connected to the lack of funding. As Biljana said, we do not have access to modernization fund as the members of energy community, and of course, it's the lack of capacities. And that is, when it comes to the lack of capacities, that CSOs can actually help, because they nurture expertise through the years of their involvement in the topics, through our conferences, writing policy papers, publications, that can serve as a valuable resources when creating policies and actually implementing them. And on the other hand, active expertise is also one of the ways that we can help the ministries which lack the capacities in drafting and implementing public policies. When it comes to another main role of the CSO, that's actually, as they call it, facilitating public dialogue. And it's sort of raising awareness campaigns where you simply try to explain to the citizens, hey, these are the consequences of not decarbonizing the Serbian economy. This is the consequences of air pollution. So we try to explain it in simple terms for everybody to understand these complex topics. So it's like connecting science and scientific facts and highly complex topics to the citizens, or you can say academia to the citizens, and also connecting the public sector and the public institutions to the citizens as well, like fostering shadow consultations when there is no formal consultations for some public documents, explaining to the citizens the meaning of the main measures and mechanisms in those documents, and that. And lastly, the role of CSOs is to be the agent of change. All this facilitating of public dialogue and fostering the public participation in decision-making processes is aimed towards that, to make change, to advocate for change, to bring some innovative policy approaches, to create, draft and implement documents that are created, that are ambitious but yet realistic to achieve. So, and the main barriers of entry, I think, and the main problems that CSOs face in this regard is, of course, the shrinking space of civil society, mostly in the recent years. As you know, in Serbia, civil society representatives are always called like foreign mercenaries, and like that. And that is one of the biggest problems. Then it's reduced freedom of speech, political blockades, and of course, sometimes the low political will to address the challenges and the decarbonization process as well. Another one barrier of entry that I would like, and it is the fault of CSOs, on one hand. On the other hand is the lack of media freedom, is the lack of cooperation with the media, and the lack of low capacities with the CS sector in working with the media, which needs to be improved in order to raise awareness and be the agent of change we would like to be. And for the end, I would just like to underline that we are really on the same side, both the public and the CSO sector, and we strive toward the same goals, and it's mandatory that we work together in order to achieve our decarbonization goals for 2030 and for 2050.
Thank you, Mr. Dizarevic. Actually, I am conducting a small needs assessment while I'm hearing the inputs to today's panel for our future steps and our future work on this. And if you allow me just on your inputs on the role of the civil society, I would like to add one more important role. Mrs. Ramic has mentioned the monitoring of policies as one of the very important part of the work. Besides contributing to the policy development with expertise, capacity, and so on, raising awareness among the citizens on the importance of the topic, also on their responsibility in the whole work, CSOs, I believe, can be also a good partner in monitoring, not in terms of only policy implementation per se. This part in numbering the policies that were reformed and the bylaws created and so on is practically ticking the boxes part of the work, but measuring the real life impact of those policies can be really challenging, and CSOs can be a good partner, I believe, there. Having access to the citizens and knowing how this affects their real life in qualitative terms, even in, if possible in some cases in quantitative. So I would kindly suggest that this also role to be considered for a continuation of such partnership. I will come back now to the second round of the questions. Going back to Ms. Lazic, in your opinion, what are the pathways available for coal phase-out and renewable energy restructuring of the economy? And having this example of the Visegrad countries with our study that is going to be presented today, what can Serbia learn from the Visegrad group?
Actually, regarding this coal phase out, I think that Biljana already mentioned, so I think that definitely pathways will be definitely determined by these two key strategic documents. This is Integrated Climate Energy and Climate Plan and New Development Energy Strategy. But what I would like to emphasize maybe is that also this EU policy, this EU Green Deal, Green Agenda for Western Balkans countries, and especially this Fit for 55 package, including carbon border adjustment mechanism, are also very important drivers for Serbia and for all Western Balkan countries in this process of decarbonization. I really believe that that Green Agenda for Western Balkan countries holds significant potential to attract investments, especially in renewable energy projects. Also, what we can notice already, even this carbon border adjustment mechanism was adopted in July of this year. Our industry, our companies become very aware that they need to change their technologies, that they need to optimize their production to lower level of emissions in order to be competitive and in order to remain on EU market and on EU and international market. Regarding the Visegrad countries and our experience, it was really very useful for us because we had the opportunity to participate in this study tour, and we visited Poland and the Czech Republic in May of this year. And I can say that one of our key similarities definitely is our historical reliance on coal for electricity generation. What we could see is actually that we are all facing, that we are all have common goals, and that we are facing common challenges to decarbonize our energy sectors, to reduce coal dependence, to increase renewable energy capacities, to introduce new, greener, cleaner technologies. What was really very valuable for us it was actually to realize that we are on same pathway, but the key difference between our countries is that Visegrad countries actually can benefit very much being EU members, and since they have really access to EU funding mechanism, vital mechanisms, so I mean, Serbia lacks that because we are not candidate. We are not EU member yet. Hopefully we will become, but yeah. Anyhow, what we can learn from them and what we really saw is that timely preparation, timely planning is a key precondition for this process. We actually could see that all these countries had very comprehensive national transition plans and regional plans. So communication with citizens and appropriate timely planning should be really seen and should be something that Serbia also should do as a first step.
Thank you very much, and also thank you for opening the door to my next question, which is on EU funding, given this work does need substantial financial support. I will pass the question to Mr. Avignon on what are the key instruments, EU's instruments, that Serbia can use in the decarbonization process and in our position at the moment, and what we could expect in the future.
Thank you. First and foremost, I think the EU accession process itself support the Western Balkans and Serbia in particular for unlocking potentials. What I mean by this is that we, of course, support the government policies, we support investments, we support legislative improvement, we support the civil society organization to be more vocal. We believe that this is a very important value for society and helps development. So what I mean by unlocking potential is that you know, money is not infinite, but important investment and key investment need, of course, time for preparation, need a legal basis, but also need, let's say, good engineering. And good engineering comes from taking important decision, but it also means that there is let's say science behind. And what we need in Serbia for decarbonization. Political willingness, it's been said before. Money, it's been said before as well. I do believe that we need more coordination, whether it's between the donors, the government, between ministries. It's not always been the case that ministries could share a lot of information together. It's sometimes also competitive between international financing institutions. It can be complicated for Serbian administration with some limited capacities also to have to deal with all this international community being present here, and each of them is offering different tools and services or money and different loan rates. There are new actors. China, Saudi Arabia is also lending to Serbia, and then there's the private sector. You know, what I mean by unlocking the potential is that it's not the state or the EU to invest into everything. The major role of private sector, and then they can find money on the market to invest into renewables, in particular in renewables, and then of course for do I need this? You hear me at the back? Yes. Yeah. It's recorded. Let's see. Did I turn it off?
Maybe battery died.
The EU has talked too much, so that's the end.
No battery, yeah. Okay. Oh.
We'll have to find.
Do you want me to try? No, it's done.
It's going to be heard. It's going to be good. It's good.
So no, I just wanted to add on this that I think the EU supports Serbia and the Western Balkans in general with I used to say three things. The first one is policies and legislation improvements. So that's also done in line with the energy community framework. Of course, we have all our directives on environment, on energy, and we have more coming with the new legislation coming from the Green Deal. We still have I think I heard the number of 17 more legislative acts to come from the EU on the Green Deal. The second one is investment. So public investment, private investment, individual investment. You know, I have some friends in Serbia. They don't wait for anyone. They put solar panels on their roof, and they try to be prosumers themselves. And of course, it takes a bit of money, but then after 3, 4, 5 years, they can see their energy bill, and somehow they also think it's a good thing to do, and bring the neighbors to see what they're doing, and explain to the kids that they are doing this for the planet, and it's participate to the overall benefit of the society. The third aspect I usually mention is dialogue, and I think this is why we're having a conference here, dialogue between ministries, dialogue between the donors, dialogue with the media. We know that it's not always easy to have media attention from all the parts of the society, and we know that sometimes the media do not reflect exactly the reality or what science tells us. But this is what we are pushing. This is what the EU is pushing overall in environment and climate, as for sure, in other sectors as well. And we believe that at least with these 3 pillars, we can ensure that society progress. And then we come back to money, of course, investment in money, again and again. Serbia I want to say again, Serbia is very energy intense. It has a lot of hidden costs of the actual energy mix on public health, years of life lost, economic loss on people not going to work, being sick, and so on. So integrating this cost into the price of electricity, you would have surprises. And yeah, so I want to say that we invest. We have different tools. We have green agenda. We have a green agenda project. We have a green efficiency project. We work with the EBRD, with the IB, with KfW. We do a bit of everything: public buildings efficiency, pilot actions through the green agenda, afforestation. Afforestation. Climate action is across the board. You cannot just deal with energy. You have to deal also with the forest. You have to deal with waste management, which is a big emitter of methane. So we are trying to work across all these subsectors in order to limit the emissions of Serbia and in the neighboring countries. Yes, so we have pre-accession tools. It's true that Serbia doesn't have access to the big money of the EU, like the cohesion funds, but it might come very soon, and we are now working on gearing up, helping Serbia to be more equipped to be able to receive more funds. And it always comes back to the capacities, absorption capacities, technical capacities in the ministries. There is no way that that Serbia can face what is coming in the incoming years with a limited administration, whether at local and national level. Climate people in the Ministry of Environment is how many people in your ministry?
Now 9.
Now 9, and for the last year it was 1 or 2? Okay. So
you see our willingness. No, you see our real commitment to deal with.
So from 2 last 5 years to 9 now. Okay, and how many we need? 45? Yes.
But
and this is not
100% increase. So
yes.
Please.
It's already a big increase, but if you looking at what is needed, it's even much more that we know. So the capacities mean also to have technicians, engineers, people with full experience, and okay, young students can come to the ministry and learn, but we also need people with a lot of knowledge. And this is where most of the time, civil society can also help. So the idea of an open society is when you count on every strength and not looking at only let's say the friends, but you have to expand your scope to tap onto all the resources available.
Thank you, Mr. Avignon. Mr. Tezarevic, it was mentioned by Ms. Lazic in one of her previous responses that learning by doing is one of the methods that they will be facing with in this whole endeavor. But it's also learning from other experiences and other mistakes. And in this respect, I wanted to ask you, what is your opinion on the good practice examples of the countries of the Visegrad Group in the cooperation of the institutions, especially with the civil society and the business, can be applied in the process of decarbonization in Serbia?
Thank you for your question. Well, I think that a lot of the experiences can be applied because although the situation is for the cooperation, intersectoral cooperation is much more favorable in Visegrad countries than it is in Serbia, it is still similar context. Like the role of the CSOs is still similar, and they're facing quite some number of problems that we are also facing, like shrinking Israel space, not as much in Czech Republic, but mostly in Hungary, where they are often perceived negatively by the policy decision makers and lately in the general public. But of course, there are many good practice examples that could be implemented in Serbia, and one of my favorite ones is in Poland, actually, when they were doing a territorial just transition plan for the region of Eastern Greater Poland. Yeah. That's it, and it was an open participation between all the stakeholders and all sectors of the society, including business, which was even the main driver for the change and shift to the green economy and for dialogue, CSOs and local institutions. And like like 30 years ago, I think, they were aware, and decision makers and CSOs were raising awareness that the mines will close at some point. And the miners were ready. So, like the early retirement programs did not start were not that big because people already didn't get the jobs at the mines and the infrastructure connected to the mines. But those who did and who were younger and who left, they got into the early retirement programs that were devised by the dialogue. And the second thing, the younger people that are actually working are going to go to the retraining and reskilling program that is going to be organized jointly by these three sectors. So that is one of the examples that can be done, I believe, in Serbia that can prove to be fruitful for everybody. I mean, yeah, there are also some negative comments about the impact of that program, but the time will tell in a couple of years, I think. And another interesting example that I would like to point out, and I would like to see actually, but it's only my wish, is from Poland. It's actually the Citizens-Wide Assembly on Energy Policy that was organized in 2022 by Shipyard Foundation. And it is like a form of deliberative democracy, like a citizen assembly were going to define the energy policy priorities and the most important energy policy measures and present them to policymakers, and included 110,000 phone calls to the people that were selected randomly, but they tried to get every group, profession, and every group in the society. And in the end, the 90 people were selected, and then they participated in a capacity building weekend and expert workshops, which they actually gained knowledge on the topics of energy policy and the implications that they can have. And after some time and after some deliberation that was done online, they had a final deliberative weekend where recommendations were formulated and selected and actually voted on them. And main findings were and recommendations were disseminated to the policymakers. And it was mostly the first topic was the energy efficiency as a means to alleviate people from energy poverty, development of the electrical grid, increasing the share of renewables, and etc. So I would say that these two examples, and especially the last one, I would really like to see it implemented in Serbia. It was a CSO initiative, but it can be a public initiative, it can be even a private initiative from the private sector. But I think that it is really necessary for the whole society in Serbia to be included into the planning and creation of the policy documents and setting of the targets and priorities for our own development, especially in the sector of decarbonization.
Thank you very much. When we're talking about policy reforms, decarbonization, environmental protection, and especially within the EU integration context, we cannot skip to take a perspective on the Serbia's progress in the chapter 27, I'm sorry, of the European integration process. So I will here ask Ms. Lazic to give us her perspective on what has been done, what needs to be done next, and where do institutions need support in this process, and from whom do you see as the most important stakeholders to gain support from?
Actually, I think that Serbia really accelerated its progress, especially in this environmental protection and climate change field last few years. However, as Antoine said, I mean, EU legislation is moving target, so of course that there will be need for further alignment in the future. But what I think and what I would like to point out that equally important now is to implement what we have already adopted and what we planned through our strategic documents. And therefore there is really need to have support, both financial and technical, from international community and especially from EU. Antoine also mentioned some other funds. I didn't mention when I spoke about Visegrad countries, but they have these transitional plans were done as a precondition to access Just Transition Fund, other social cohesion fund, other funds that are not currently available for Serbia. And I think that we really should think about it. Because of course, if we are sharing common goals, we maybe should have the same opportunities. But I would again repeat what Antoine said: it will not be just to provide us access. We also need to increase our own capacity to be able to absorb all this support. But support definitely is needed in all ways: financial and technical and knowledgeable and any kind of support, because implementation will be especially challenging. So
thank you very much, and also thank you for mentioning the need for access to the other funds within the EU. This is actually one of the topics that is being put on the table and being more and more mentioned as the need of allowing the pre-accession countries to have access to structural funds and to the funds that are available to the EU member states in order to make a better progress in such large and demanding work and investments, particularly within the environmental and energy and infrastructure sectors. And speaking of the financial support, Mr. Avignano, you already mentioned some lines, potential lines of funding, but we also know that CSOs sometimes cannot access all of the funds that the state can. And what would you suggest as the key channels of the EU support for the CSOs active in the field of the environmental protection?
You mean for funding, or well, I think every 2 years we have a civil society facility round with calls for proposals. Usually I make sure that there is environment there, but it's not automatic. But I think the last 4 years we had 2 calls, and then we had a call for operational grants. And then I think there are other line of fundings, like if you go through live projects. Even Serbia is not directly a beneficiary, but in consortium with neighboring countries, Serbia can be part of live program, Life Plus. Well, it's not directly for decarbonization, but you can work on biodiversity, because climate change and loss of biodiversity is two faces of the same coin. They mutually nurture each other or destroy each other, if you see like this. So biodiversity conservation and natural protection is also of utmost importance in order to keep the nature resilient. And there I know that the Serbian NGOs can also look for funding. And of course the EU is EU money, but we also have EU member states. We work in Team Europe. There are bilateral funds from Sweden, from Germany. I'm not expert into their budget lines, but I know that they also can offer grants. And then, if you allow me, there's also always the question for CSOs about the membership fees. I think it's very important for NGOs to be independent financially from the state or even from big donors. It's not I've been in the Balkans the last 20 years, and there are very, very few NGOs that are financially independent from any donors. But this is the path to take one day or another, and to be funded by your members. And for projects, ad hoc projects, it can be funded by donors. But there's a need to push this side, because it's very related with the membership. Let's say, the members' willingness to do something through that association. The bird protection, BirdLife UK, the Eaux et Rivières de Bretagne, they live from some subsidies, but they mostly live from their memberships fees. And sometimes it's not too much to ask, maybe a few thousand of dinars per year for membership fees for an NGO, but at least if you grow this number of members, and then they have more sense of ownership of what they're doing with this NGO. I still contribute myself to some nature protection NGOs in France. It's my personal stuff, but it's a kind of political, or it's a gesture. When you do this for your NGOs on your place, it's meaningful, I think. And so there is money for NGOs. It's limited. It's not as the level of infrastructure investment with hundreds of millions, but I think also the civil society organization should work closer together, and some are very small and depend on very few people, and they definitely need to work more in kind of networking. And yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. And speaking of networking and coordination among the civil society organizations, Mr. Dizdarevic, what is your insight on the actual cooperation within the CSOs there? And is the coordination good enough? Are the most important ones represented with their inputs and so on? And because this is also a very, very important aspect. And what kind of additional support you think they would need in this area other than financing?
I would have to say that the intra-sector cooperation is deemed quite necessary in the civil sector society, especially in the form of environmental protection, which is such a complex and wide subject. It stretches from water quality and water management to climate change and to air pollution. So one CSO cannot possibly keep track of them all, cannot have the expertise, cannot write projects on all the topics. So forming consortiums, writing projects is necessary, following the creation of some highly complex and integrated document like the environmental protection strategy that is currently being drafted is a necessity. And I have to say we are doing quite a good job. I mean, there is not a perfect coordination between all in that kind of sense, because some of them have different views on the things than the others. We have maybe our interests are not 100% aligned. Some organizations like the nuclear energy options, some do not. So in that kind of sense, it's not perfect, but it is there, and I have to say it's pretty good. And you have many reports, like the Coalition 27 report that analyzed the Chapter 27 alignment and harmonization in Serbia with the EU acquis in that framework, and there are 8 NGOs currently in that network, yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. And what kind of support do CSOs in that area need? I would have to say it's first capacity building and networking, because I think it is of the most importance to create these kind of networks, like Coalition 27, the Mreža Dobre Energije that is currently lagging a bit behind, in order to harmonize the interests, in order to follow topics together, to write press statements and press releases together, and to have the same positions on the topics and the decisions of the government. I think that is the main kind of support that CSOs need, and the main thing that they can do. So that is pretty much it for me.
Thank you very much. And we have some 15 minutes left at our panel, which I would like to use to open the discussion, and asking of any questions by our participants here who are in the audience, if you may have for our panelists, or any of your comments that you would find valuable to be included in the conclusions of this conference. So I hereby open the floor for your questions and comments.
Sonia Licht, Foundation BFP for a Responsible Society, used to be known until 2 years ago as Belgrade Fund for Political Excellence, because we were created with the idea that capacity building of political leaders and political actors in the first place, and everybody else active in public life, is absolutely necessary for building and sustaining democratic institutions. But I must say, one of the main probably reasons why we decided, when we became mature, 18 years of life, that we change our title, our name, was exactly because of the topic we are discussing today. We came to the conclusion that for political excellence we will have to wait a very long time to come, but we must in fact put the major emphasis on responsibility of the entire society. Now, one thing that we didn't mention in this discussion, and I really need to mention it here today, is the role of people representatives, IDEST, the role of the parliament. My organization, and I am very proud of this fact, was one of the founders of the non-formal Green Parliamentary Group in the Serbian parliament 13 years ago. It managed to survive very different hurdles, but then, unfortunately for the time being, it is completely dead. In the last convocation, this Green Parliamentary Group simply was not possible to be established. Obviously, not because of the CSO's role in this whole process, which was always quite intensive, but because the parliamentarians could not agree even on these topics to get together. So this is, in my humble opinion, one of the major problems we are facing, that Mr. Avignon mentioned the third pillar, dialogue, that the dialogue between various actors of the society is lacking, and first and foremost, the dialogue among those who are the decision makers. So in my opinion, this is a very difficult situation at this point in time, and this is where we need coordination of all the actors in order to also make pressure to basically change this situation, which is in my opinion very harmful for policies and everything else that is happening in our society regarding environmental protection, regarding the Green Deal. Another example I need to mention as well is the Green Chair, which was an institution we managed to establish something like 10 years ago when I say we, the civil society of Serbia, to have representatives present at the meetings of the Committee for the Protection of the Environment. As you happen to know, the whole committee has major problems, and one of the outcomes of those major problems is that the Green Chair doesn't work either at the moment. If I remember that the public dialogue on sustainable use of energy regionally started in 2010 with support of GIZ, the entire Western Balkans is still part of that network, schools of political studies, including my own. I must say it is really discomforting to come to the conclusion that in 2011 we had the strength to organize a huge meeting of all the parliaments present in Belgrade on energy efficiency in the Western Balkans as the most important energy policy. And today, as the situation is as I described, I did not take the floor to give you only the problem, but also I think it is extremely important, as I said, to try to act together in order to really make the parliament what it should be. Because the major monitoring also policies have to happen from the parliament. We CSOs can help, others can help, but they are the major monitoring actor in the society. Second thing that I wanted to mention is I think it is extremely important to put more emphasis on education, especially on education of children. I would like to call your attention, I'm sure some of you know, about the 6 Portuguese children who took 32 governments to the European Court of Human Rights, and they have this huge process to start, in fact, because they are accusing them of being climate actors of climate catastrophe that we are living. So this is just another proof that yes, we are talking about the future of our children. We are talking, I'm personally very much talking about the future of my grandchildren. And I know that unfortunately these topics, which are probably the most important one for our planet, are still very rarely present in the school curricula. So I think that is another thing which we have to do together, to really call on the educational authorities to quickly, not the next 10 years, think about how to make the schools really the places where this topic will be very much on the every day on the agenda. And of course the third address is the public media especially the public television. Yes, it's there, but far, far from what we would think is enough. Thank you.
We want to collect a few more questions and comments and then to get back to it.
Let's see if there are any other questions or comments.
Thank you. I'll introduce myself again, Gigafactor from Europeum, Czech Republic. I actually have one question. We discussed quite a lot the access to the funds, so it will be kind of a two-folded question to Antoine and to Sandra. I would be first and foremost curious how actually European Union or European Commission in that regard thinks about some of the proposals coming from the think tankers regarding a sectoral integration of candidate countries that could actually make the access to some of the funds possible already in the pre-accession process. And to Sandra, obviously, the question there is about the capacity of obviously all the ministries involved in this. Do you think, because obviously one thing is to hire as many experts as possible on the national level, but do you think also some kind of a further cooperation and maybe secondment of some of the countries like Czech Republic, like Poland, and the others could also help you at the work you are doing in this process?
Let's ask if there are more questions, perhaps to solicit them. Okay. Are there any additional questions or comments? Okay. I will start actually from the last, so that Sandra and Antoine can offer respond to Giga's question, and then we'll return to the first comment. It's okay.
So I should go first. Thank you for the question. Yes, actually, Ministry is using all possible capacities. We have opportunity to have these twinning projects with colleagues from European countries. They are coming to Serbia and they really support us a lot. I think that all what we already adopted was prepared actually with that kind of support. So as I said, also colleagues from Czech Republic and from Poland are also very welcomed, since all our similarities that I mentioned in my previous answers. But there is a procedure how we actually can use. We have various type of instruments that we can use. Also, TAIEX instruments are very useful for us. Sometimes we organize some kind of TAIEX events in Belgrade where experts from EU countries are coming and talk about certain topics, and some study tours. But these twinning projects are really, in the past, were really the most significant for us. So, because colleagues from same level in the ministry are coming, dealing with the same issues, and they can really solve our problems that we are facing with. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. So you heard about this new methodology for EU accession. I think that was the background of your question. I'm afraid I don't know too much what is in the. I mean, there's a new methodology already adopted, following I think Macron's initiative. But for now, we have more or less the same way of doing business. We have IPA funding every year. We're trying to do with Serbia, Ministry of European Integration. We are putting what we call operational programs. It's like a program of 3-4 years, reflecting operational program that usually that already exists with EU funds for EU member states. So now, if countries could group together in order to access better, I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's good technically for the sector. I'm not sure it's possible, let's say, legally with our tools, but. Definitely, if there is, for example, a cross-border project, imagine that, I don't know, on the Lim River, for instance, where with Bosnia we have issues of waste on one side of the border, and then the waste come to Serbia. Maybe there could be a cross-border project that could make sense, and then possibly there could be some you know, Bosnian, it's complicated there, but Serbian and EU money. The same would go for the other neighbors. But no, I think to your question, no, until now, as far as I know, they will not be this type of system where countries could group together to have access to a pot of money that is environmental or energy kind of sector. For now, we have regional projects, we have cross-border projects, and then we have national projects. But again, the science of budget lines in the EU or the Western Balkan investment framework is changing also, is evolving. We're trying to be as efficient as possible. So there is, but ultimately, you know, for example, municipalities need fund. Public utility company to deal with water, wastewater need fund at local level. In most of the EU countries, it's not a Ministry of Environment or Construction that deals with the wastewater treatment plant or a landfill. This is at the level of a municipality, or 3-4 municipalities together. So in the Balkans, we are dealing at national level, but then sometimes we put on the shoulders of small municipalities huge projects, huge investments, and they don't have the capacity at local level to do that. And it's a bit reverse system. And we're trying, KfW is trying, EU is trying to work, and others, FD, BRD, to work more with the municipalities, more with the local people that have direct access to the environmental service that they need, and it's also linked with the financing and you know, and the capex and apex and the operational management of the facility itself. So at the end of the day, we have a facility, whether it's a wastewater treatment plant or landfill, it has a cost. Who pays for what? Who pays for the service? And it's very important when we design projects to make sure that they are affordable for the population and the citizen there. We don't want to build something that is not being used. So it's not only a question of the availability of the money, but it's how you use the money in the best way possible, so that it's affordable and with a good level of service. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any additional inputs or questions? No. Here I would just like to make a reference to Mrs. Licht's comments, and thank you actually very much for bringing up the Parliament as a very important part of the chain, and a very important stakeholders, particularly in adopting the legislation and the education of children. And this I would see within the scope of the overall awareness raising need. With children, yes, it's much easier, I think, to help them shape their awareness from the early age and from the very, very beginning, rather than that it's on the other side a little bit more difficult to change the awareness of the older population. And the public discourse, yes, media and TV and the general public discourse is very, very important in the whole thing, and presenting the problems in a very, how would I say, citizens applicable manner and the impact on their own lives. So I will actually propose to make some form of a conclusions of this conference, because even in this first panel, which is, I would say, more strategic, and the second panel will be more expert oriented, I have already solicited quite a few of important inputs that could serve as the roadmap for further activities and for prospective continuation of this project. In terms of the needs, many of them are identified here, needs in different terms, in the capacities, in the expertise, in the funding, and other types of support than funding. the need for awareness raising and education, the need for coordination with all the relevant stakeholders, and I also thank Mr. Avignon for mentioning the local levels, because this is something that I saved as my last point to refer to, and also involving the media with proper language, transmitting and broadcasting the important information on this. So I will propose to put at least some conclusions, not in the weighted text form, but rather in the bullet points that could also serve us as a roadmap for the future activities. Thank you, the panelists. Thank you also, dear audience, for bearing with us. We are right in time, perfect timing. We are on the schedule of the agenda and on the schedule for the coffee before the second panel. And something which I have intentionally saved as a cherry on the top, which I would just like to briefly mention as the one more important framework for this work under the not only the decarbonization but of the green agenda in general, is the regional and local development within the country. And this is one of the main pillars of the new focused strategic endeavor of the European movement in Serbia. And that while taking a look into the green agenda implementation and activities that the local and regional development should be looked into more details, and this is something that we are going to be paying special attention on as well. So on this final note and input, I thank you once again, dear panelists, for your valuable and very constructive inputs, and also the audience for bearing with us and for providing your comments, which are also important for the conclusions in our future work. And I invite you all for coffee now, and also to stay with us for the second panel, which will be more interesting in the expert terms. Thank you.